have Sanjay Purohit from Societal Platforms. We have Sanjay Joshi from Federation for Ecological Security, FES. And then we also have Vijaya from Socion, who will be helping me in the second part of this presentation. So today is a follow-up to the last session that we had on winning together. I will do a short recap, but before I do that, I'd like to hand it over to Sanjay Purohit and have him provide some context for this call from a societal platform perspective before we take it forward. Over to you, Sanjay.
Thank you so much, Anand. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here. Thank you so much for joining us today evening or morning, depending on where you are. Last time when we met on the same call, we talked about the need to find a mechanism to sort of conserve our knowledge, ensure that the capacity that we are building is preserved in the ecosystem and applied and reapplied. And we had Mala who had joined us to talk, and Anand will share more. Now, one of the interesting facets of this entire journey is dealing with large, complex, and dynamic problems, right? All of you deal with large, complex, and dynamic problems, whether it is education, whether it is healthcare, whether it is urbanization, justice. FES deals with the management of commons. It's essentially all of you are working through large problems because they have population scale impact, complex problems because they're unpredictable, and also dynamic problems because they keep shifting with time. And we spoke about this last time. Now, one of the biggest challenges of large, complex, dynamic problem is that there are many facets of the problem which we can't see. Let's take life in general, like all of us. Humanity in general has been trying to maximize life for centuries, right? And the struggle in maximizing life is our ability to see the factors that can be potentially life inhibiting. And so we have invested in lots of mechanisms and lots of approaches to see. For example, thermometer, to see whether is there a symptom of something that is wrong. Microscopes, to see if there are microbes around. ECG, to see whether body's core rhythm of the heartbeat is working as desired. MRIs, to see whether there is some other disorder which is in the layers of the body which you can't see otherwise. And we have invested relentlessly, we continue to invest in getting better and better. And you know that the latest scan stores the human body's data in gigabytes. And the reason for that is I want to know every layer, every cell, every tissue, what's going on. And why? Because we want to deal with a very, very complex and a dynamic problem and a large problem, which is the human being and life, right? So look at the situation that we're all dealing with the virus. The challenge that we have is we can't see how it transmits and how it grows exponentially. And the biggest complexity is because in the period when it's spreading, it is unseen. And then by the time it becomes seen, it's too late, right? So I think the struggle of seeing is an important struggle in solving large, complex, and dynamic problems. Now, if I improve our ability to see, I may be able to improve our ability to solve, is a hypothesis that we will discuss today, and we will break it into discussions. And let's try to sort of put it into a 2x2 matrix, okay? I see, you see, I solve, you solve, okay? So on one extreme is you see the problem, you solve the problem, right? And on the other end of the spectrum is I see the problem and I solve the problem. The challenge with you see the problem and you solve the problem is that organized such as ours is one, solving a problem for millions, right? So if we resort to if our beneficiaries or participants, as we like to call them, if they come to this position saying, oh, you think it's a problem, you see the problem, you solve the problem, then it is one solving for the millions. Whereas if we can help people see their problem and give them the ability to solve their problem, then it is millions solving for the millions. And I think that is the question that intrigues me. That's the question that potentially we will explore some facets of today. is that how do we understand what is our ability to see? How do we improve our ability to see? And how do we use it to solve and improve our ability to solve? Remember last session, we talked about how we develop capacity of people and they go away. So what's the problem with that? The problem is we taught some people to see. We gave them the capacity, we gave them the expertise, we gave them the tools, and then they went away. And now suddenly we lose our ability to see. Again, the next set of people come, again, we have to develop them. We have to give the ability to see again. So I think I am looking forward to the discussion today. And I know that Sanjay Joshi is here and he's going to take us through his fascinating journey. That how improving the ability to see and retaining the ability to see improves our ability to solve. And how do you do that at scale for millions of people over time is potentially the core essence of the discussion that I am looking forward to today. Over to you, Anand, as the evening unfolds.
Thank you, Sanjay. Before I hand over to the other Sanjay, just a little breakdown of today's plan. One of the feedbacks we received from last session was that it'd be good. We had discussed a conceptual framework and an idea. So I'll spend a couple of minutes just dwelling on that or recapping that idea. But then we will have Sanjay, who will be able to provide a more realistic view of the problem that they're trying to resolve at scale. And once he paints that picture, then we can look at how they are leveraging data and how data is helping, as Sanjay says, you see, I solve, you solve, the whole gamut of it. So let me just spend a couple of minutes here, if you don't mind. Just give me a second. I'll just do a quick recap. Forgive me, my Google skills aren't the best. Here you go. So a quick recap from last session. I know we saw that about 70% of you have come back to this session, but there are few that may not be familiar with what we discussed last time. So one of the things we said is, this was just an idea that we presented. We said, like in nature, if we were to mimic nature, all living things consume and generate nutrients in nature, right? And when they're alive, they generate nutrients, and when they're dead, they become nutrients. And these nutrients then create and sustains life and are reused by other living things across the ecosystem. So if we were to take this analogy, we said, what if we could generate digital nutrients from interactions that partners have across the ecosystem? What if those digital nutrients were sustained in a manner that they could be accessible and used by other programs, individuals, or communities? The idea being, can we mimic nature's theory of change to create an intrinsically sort of collaborative ecosystem? So we're going to explore this from one particular perspective, saying, when we, in our ecosystem, particularly if you look at area of commons, etc., programmatic efforts are quite common. And question is, how do we create a nutrient-rich environment for societal development? So we're going to take this concept and explore it further. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Sanjay Joshi, who will provide us some context of what FE is doing, and then the problem that they're trying to resolve and what sort of challenges they face. Over to you, Sanjay.
Yeah, thank you, Anand. Yeah. So I'm Sanjay Joshi. I'm part of Foundation for Ecological Security, and I've been with the foundation for the last nearly 30 years now. Worked at grassroots, from implementing on ground to the regional level, working on various aspects of the organization in terms of partnering with other organizations, working on the policy front as well. Today, what I'm trying to do is to share some of the initial lessons from our work that we are trying to do in case of Orissa, where we are partnering with Orissa Livelihood Mission, the HUF, Socion, and the village communities in trying to create models of enhancing systems capacities, as well as create digital nutrients, as Anand was sharing with you, to be used by all. So the presentation overall is divided in two sections. The first section I'll be dealing in terms of the ground, what is happening, and then will be followed by a presentation by Vijaya and Anand, who will help in understanding how this can be analyzed using technology, and the data is getting generated and analyzed to help people use it later on and as an open source kind of a data. So we as an organization work on the issues of commons, poverty, and issues of rural livelihoods. If we look in India, when we look, there are around 200 million acres of land which is classified as commons, which are basically community forests, pastures, and water bodies. Nearly a third of India's population depend on these commons for their basic needs of food, fodder, fuel wood, medicine, timber, and cash. When we overall analyze the value of these commons, it is estimated to be nearly $99 billion annually. Commons also play a very significant role in providing critical ecosystem services like provisioning surface water, soil nutrients, etc., which are very critical for the farming activities. So in this context, in 2001, FES started working, and over the years have evolved models and which have been validated over time for working on commons, impacting outcomes at ecological and economic front, both at the local as well as at the regional level. The model presently is being scaled with partners and with governments also. So, but what happens when we look at the same model and we try to scale it? When we try to scale it, we see there is a lack of convergence. There are systemic barriers that are existing. One is the lack of convergence between different departments. May it be government, even within the government, departments don't interact with each other, and they don't interact with the NGOs, research bodies. So there is an increased requirement for the various actors to be working in a coordinated and a cohesive manner, so that there is an important element of convergence that happens between programs, between capacities. Secondly, we also see that the acts and the programs do not get implemented to the level that they should be because of the lack of awareness and capacities of the villagers, NGOs, and government departments. Also, there is lack of reliable information and technology which is being used at all levels. Therefore, it is important to build the capacity of the entire system where everyone learns from each other, as well as the capacities become shared resources. Thirdly, there is a problem at the policy front also, and policy as well as the programmatic front, where all the different aspects of life are not seen together. Generally, we have programs which are targeted towards economic benefits. But what about the ecology? What about the social development? So there is a need for all the policies and the programs to consider all these factors together when implementing a program and or designing a program, and also giving centrality to the issues of women at large. Lastly, we also are missing trustworthy data and information which is available to all the stakeholders in a consumable format on a continuous basis to improve the accountability at all levels. So the focus of the program should be on creating digital nutrients and footprints that can be used by all over a period of time, beyond programs, beyond regions. So these barriers which were existing in the system, they formed the foundation of our project, our strategy of working with OLM in the state. So when we looked at Odisha Livelihood Mission, it presented us with an opportunity to address these underlying problems. Odisha Livelihood Mission has a commitment to work on rural livelihoods and has a policy backing to do it. The whole program architecture from the state to the village level was there with the system, with the Odisha Livelihood Mission, especially when we talk about the rural cadre in terms of the Krishi Mitra that are available at the village level. And these are village women who have been capacitated a bit to play the role of village mobilizers. And these are most critical component of the entire architecture who will move or who will tilt the entire power to decide in favor of the communities. So it is also from the angle what Sanjay Purohit was highlighting in terms of enabling their abilities to see as well as solve their own problems. When we talk about the funds, these are available with the department and other departments as well. For example, if you look at funds for restoration, it is available with the Right to Employment Guarantee Act, and various programs of the government in terms of agriculture and all also enable some degree of funding. So what is important? What important is to set the concerted efforts to seize all these opportunities. So what are we trying to achieve? Towards this end, we are making efforts to strengthen community, government and ecosystem capacity. We are aiming to increase the participation, engagement and learning of the first line workers, that is the Krishi Mitra, so that they can engage with farmers and other community members to address the issue of water security and farm-based livelihoods. We are focusing on generating assets in the form of capacitated community level cadre and communities who understand the concept, can analyze village level data and information, and can raise a debate in the village for improved planning and implementation. And more importantly, we are doing it at speed and at scale, while we are focusing on improving the quality both of the economic and the ecological outcomes. So what was the challenge? The challenge was how to do it. As when we started, there was no data that was available in terms of the capacity that existed in the system. So we started to build the capacity of the 800 Krishi Mitra that were available in the 5 districts that we were operating in, and using the conventional method of capacity enhancement. We focused on providing training, but it is important when we look at only 3 high dose training to be provided over a period of 1 crop cycle. So how do we understand that there is an improvement in the depth of learning? And how are these participants, the Krishi Mits, applying the same in the field? How to collect and analyze the data which doesn't become cumbersome, so that the data collection and collation becomes an easy job, or is it readily available in the system? How do we create continuity beyond the program? It is not just a program ends and all the information that is associated with the program ends with it. So there has to be a continuity that needs to be provided. So this meant more and frequent learning and mentoring interactions that were supposed to be happening with the community cadre, generating data at the point of interaction, which is digitally verifiable and trusted, and ensuring that we leave behind assets in the form of practitioners, training contents, and other artifacts in terms of the maps, the plans that are generated over a period of time. So what are we doing? To help this entire process, we at FES have established a Prakriti Karyashala, that is a rural college, which focuses on addressing the implementation gap that exists in program and policies, and have also set India Observatory, which aims to address the gaps in accessing data and ensuring availability of technology tools that can be accessed by different actors to aid in restoration, water conservation, and good governance. So we use Zoom platforms for conducting high frequency and low duration online capacity building and guided mentoring sessions of the village cadres and the functionaries on aspects related to commons, agriculture, and water governance. These cadres were supported by digital or GIS enabled tools, which are color coded maps. You can understand these are called, we have a tool called CLART, which provides color coded maps to help people understand where they can plan interventions related to water. So which is the zone which is supports recharge, which is the zone which is supports surface water storage of surface water storage. So they can get better understanding of what are the kind of activities they are planning. We also focus at planning at village and panchayat level, especially the Gram Panchayat development plans, which are supported by data, pictures, GIS maps, so that they can be vetted externally by experts from a distance, so that it helps in better planning as well as implementation on ground. While we were building the capacities of the Krishi Mitra, there were some other aspects in the life of these Krishi Mitra which were getting enhanced or lit up. Some of these KMs initially were not knowing how to handle a smartphone or use Zoom. So for the first time in their life, they actually experienced using a Zoom. They were able to attend more trainings because the schedule of these trainings matched the schedule of their daily life. The family members were able to see what the woman is doing, the women who is the Krishi Mitra is doing, and they were able to respect the work that she was doing. So it was like a recognition that this Krishi Mitra got from the family, from the society, and in the field, in the whole process, there was an element of a pehchan or an identity that was created for her in the village. The elements which further added to the confidence was the ability to see the data that was being thrown through the CLAD tool, or the data which was being shown through the crop water budgeting kind of exercises that the Krishi Mitra were doing in terms of their village situation. And they were able to raise a debate in the village, and the debate which was backed by some sort of information that they had in their hand. For example, they were able to negotiate the position of water harvesting structure based on the information they got from the CLAD tool. There was a mutual acceptance of these Krishi Mitra with government officials like the block development officer or the agriculture department officials, who generally were participating in the guided mentoring session as experts. So whenever a Krishi Mitra was posing a problem in front of them, that problem was backed by some degree of information and data. So it was not something that they were imagining. So this built a lot of dialogue between the Krishi Mitra and the experts. And experts who happened to be coming from the government department were in a position to solve some of the problems. So there is an increased willingness in these government officials in interacting with Krishi Mitra and helping them in solving the problems. So this also added a lot of confidence of these Krishi Mitra in the whole system, as well as the vice versa, the belief of the system in these ability of these Krishi Mitras. But what happens now? Because it's not the Krishi Mitra only who's getting trained, but there are additional people in the villages, the second line of people in the village who are also getting trained. So there is an increased quantum of number of participants being trained, the number of interactions that are happening, because now the number of trainings are more, the topics that are being covered are more. So the whole data that is getting generated is far more than what can be analyzed in a simple manner. So the learning is taking, but we need to be sure that the learning is taken continuously, that there's a quality in the outcomes is also improving. And we are generating and analyzing the data that is generated in a meaningful and a trustworthy manner. And that finally, the most important aspect is that assets are being left behind. So assets in terms of capacitated Krishi Mitra who are there to understand the whole situation, to talk about it, to see the problem, as well as come forward in solving the problems. So from here, I would like to stop on this slide and would request Anand and Vijaya to be on the second part of the presentation.
Thank you, Sanjay. Just to reiterate, I think the contrast between the traditional approach versus the new challenge when you decided to commit towards building more frequent or enabling more frequent interactions. So going from 3 training sessions a year, maybe to 52 sessions a year. And then that also triggered a lot more participants and actors coming into the fold, saying that we would like these, Gram Sevaks or other government officials also to be included in the training, because they could actually see what was happening, sort of translates to a very non-linear problem, right? Going from, what was it, 2,400 interactions to almost 98,000 interactions. And I forget the other number, but from, do you recall what the other?
Yeah, 3.4 lakh perspectives.
340,000 different perspectives, because there are a lot of questions around, okay, who has, in which district, in which block, what topics have we completed, who is ready for the next season. These are the perspectives that we expect from data. That went from 340,000 or so to about 9.8 million possible perspectives that had to be supported. So let's actually take a short gap here and maybe first open it up to some questions, if people have any questions, before we get into the next level and say, how did we work together to essentially tackle this challenge? As Sanjay said, there's certain things that were already being done through CLART and others to improve the Krishi Mitra's ability to see and therefore support the arguments or the debates that they were having with the community members and government officials. So I'm happy to take any questions. Or comments if you have any.
Anand, there's a question in the chat from Tanushri Bhushan.
Yeah.
What was the qualitative scale up among the number of people reached out and the perspectives? How was that assessed? Qualitative scale up.
Sanjay, you want to take that question?
Yeah. So at the moment, the qualitative assessment is more focused around the capacity of the Krishi Mitra, in raising a debate at the grassroots level. Grassroots means the village level. Because earlier, when we look at even the planning process that happens at the grassroots in the villages, even when we look at the GPTP, it's more like the hunches of the village leaders, the panches, the ward panches. So now when the Krishi Mitra is actually raising a debate in the village, so there's far more vibrancy in the planning processes. And they are able to do it with some degree of data and information that they have on ground. And then the planning process is getting impacted. But this is initial level of success, you can say, not any transformative change that has happened over the period of time, because it's a very, the whole initiative is in a nascent state of evolving. So, but what you can say, the quality in the improvement in the interactions of these Krishi Mitra within the village and outside the village, even with the government official, is one of the most qualitative shift that we have been able to see in this particular period.
Yeah, I can add a couple of things. So during these, like Sanjay said, this is early days. We've been at this for a little over a year now. So there's a long way to go. But there was once a lot of skepticism on whether the Krishi Mitra will be able to generate the kind of debate that is necessary to prioritize collective good over individual good. But then when we look at the dialogue that happens in these virtual sessions now, I think there is increasing evidence and also confidence in the team that the kind of questions they're asking and the kind of issues that they're starting to tackle is a clear sort of indicator that we are headed in the right direction, that their agencies are being built. And I think we're also now planning to assess the self-efficacy of these Krishi Mitra on a regular basis to see first if we are building their confidence to engage in these debates and enable the change that that is required. I guess we have another question. How easy or difficult? Oops. I lost that question. How easy or difficult is it to organize so many guided mentoring sessions and you just want to do it?
So, yeah, initial level, it was very difficult because moving from a physical to a guided mentoring through digital means is something which the team was struggling with, because you don't have the feel of the physical connect in the digital means. But the one is difficulty in terms of the logistic. Yes, there's a bit of difficulty initial level, but now the systems are well established with a you can say a team of master trainers who in parallel terms can organize different kind of guided mentoring sessions. The most important part is the benefit that the guided mentoring sessions have been able to generate creates a much more appetite for these kind of sessions, rather than a training program being forced onto you and you are forced to listen to a didactic kind of a thing. This is more interactive, so experts are feeling a bit pumped up in terms of they are experiencing different questions which are new to them. The participants are learning, the participants are able to connect directly, so there is an increased appetite. So but still, yes, the number of frequency of the training needs a larger team of master trainers to be actually catering to the need, both from government as well as from within the community. These master trainers should be there. So a lot of capacity has to be generated to actually cater to the need.
Yep. And I'm sure if you talk to the practitioners on the ground, they will show you a few scars. But there is it's a bit of a transformation also for them individually. So we recall we had a meeting recently that Argyam had organized, and one of the master trainers from FES was saying that he wasn't sure what he was supposed to do with this whole online frequent thingy when it started. But he said, "I'm so glad I persisted. That I'm also learning a lot more, and there's so much more engagement." And then the government officials have now gotten involved. We have Subrat on this call, so he's more familiar with it. But if I can share, the government officials got involved once they saw this frequent discussion going on. They all wanted to be there. So it has sort of attracted the right kind of attention. And as Sanjay said, at the end of the day, the fact that it is empowering them, they feel like people are showing up, that they are part of something that is ongoing, I think has changed the demand side of it. So definitely very, very strong signs of this making an impact.
Sanjay, also, just quickly to add,
yes,
this is question of the quality of mentoring, and the second is the mode of interaction. The mode of interaction can be synchronous, asynchronous, online, offline. That gives you like 4 modes of interaction, and people believe that they're very comfortable with synchronous offline, right? So I'm sitting with you in front of a table and talking to you. So synchronous offline. And what we are trying to understand is whether people are comfortable with synchronous online. Because asynchronous online, people watch YouTube all the time, right? Saying how to make chapatis and how to make this and how to make that. And people get mentored, they learn stuff, right? But point is, synchronous online at scale is what has been an interesting experience at FES, to see what does it take to do synchronous online at scale, where people believe in that interaction and believe that the quality of mentoring is good. I think that is the run that we are going through. Hopefully over time, we will learn from FES as to what does it take to actually get high quality synchronous online. I think there's a very good question from Antika on the gender aspect of this. So maybe Sanjay, you want to take that.
Yeah. So as I was sharing the experience of one of the KMs along with during the presentation, so the experience that the KMs shared during the internal discussions which we are having with them was initially when they were part of the OLM and they were going around in the field. So the family and the people around them do not understand what they are actually doing. So when they were seeing them participating in these online sessions and asking questions which they resonated with their thought process also. So there was an increased kind of acceptance that they are into some meaningful job initially. So, but when they were also actually being able to understand and voice the issues which are important for the village. And there is also an acceptance from the part of the main decision makers who understand that they are not knowing the ground situation, they also know the planning. So that is helping, and that is certainly helping in terms of improving their capacity as well as their recognition. Subrat is there if you would like to add something on it.
I think an important part is they being able to influence and work with male farmers, with the farmers in they being able to adapt new practices. Initial discussions prior to initiating the program was that they don't listen to us. They don't accept that we know something about agriculture and we can talk to them. But there are if we look at a year after, I think the Krishi Mitras are quite confident in engaging with the community members, with the farmers, and talk about why each of these practices are important and how farmers can adapt this. The other element also is they beginning to undertake demonstrations themselves to also demonstrate that these what the aspects that we are discussing is something that is there on my field, and we can and this is working, and that is bringing I would say a lot of confidence in the Krishi Mitras themselves, but also their ability to actually influence other community members in their villages.
Thank you, Subrat. So there's another question from Sarah. How did you initially draw interest and attention to participating in the session? Sanjay?
Yeah, there are, I think, two connected questions also. How do we get OLM to partner with us? So yes, that is one challenge, because FES's focus was on commons and weaving the whole element of commons into the OLM, understanding that simply working on agriculture will not be sustainable. You have to work on the issues of commons around your village in terms of the forest land, the water, and these issues, not just on agriculture kind of things. So that was something we had to drive in with the government officials over there who were in charge of the whole the program. And once they were convinced, they were agreed to partner with us. And this was something which, because what we were talking about is using the institutional structure of the Odisha Livelihood Mission. So Krishi Mitra were being part of the whole thing. So we initially built what was important for the livelihood mission was to build their capacities on agriculture. So that was part of their mandate, and they readily agreed to it. They issued enabling orders, and initial levels, the training was like a training that they were supposed to do. But over time, from being asked to attend a training to willingly attending a training is the transformation that we are seeing. So now they are keen to attend trainings, the guided mentoring session, coming up with new case-based learning, which the cases that they are bringing, not we are pushing in front of them. So this is how from a part of a program to being a self-driven learning, that is the process has evolved over a period of time. I think, I hope I've answered the question, or...
Shall we take Nitin's question?
Yep. So this is a great question. I think from what Nitin says, that from the platform-based interactions, are you able to get a better understanding or a different understanding of the participants' aspirations than you would if you had lesser in-person interactions. I have something, but Sanjay, anything you would like?
Yeah. So the point which I've heard so frequently is because of this learning which is happening online, the frequency is high and the duration is less. So this is getting very well accommodated in the schedule of the women, and women being the main participant in this entire program, and they could schedule the whole thing well within their daily schedule. So that is one important element. And the second element is it for a village level work, person to sit on long duration training programs is slightly difficult. For them to sit for an hour, get a small module of training that is happening is much easier for them to understand and be focused on for a shorter duration. And it is enhancing the retention of whatever is being explained during the process. These are the few important elements which we have figured out during the period of interacting with the KMs post a training in terms of understanding whether the training has been effective or not. Anand?
Yeah, we're coming to the end of this section, but I'll just add, Nitin, I particularly like the question, and if I may interpret it, what we're also realizing is that if we lay the foundation, and we'll share some of what we're doing in the next section, we believe you have to kind of solve this problem in layers. I think there is a lot of unaddressed aspirations that they have. Many of them have aspirations. I remember sitting in a group in Faridabad, and out of the group of not Krishi Mitras, but similar women frontline workers, one of them said, I want to become a PT teacher, right? Completely different from the work that she was doing. And other one said that I want to continue to work and essentially make sure that I'm a productive, contributor to my family. So like this, there are, I think, a lot of aspirations there. What we're actually working on is saying that once we lay the foundation with data, we can actually build on that and enable them to start expressing those aspirations in ways that it translates to something. So giving them those pathways is something that we will share in the next section, part of this discussion.
A quick point I thought I'll just add. When we are recording these lakhs, hundreds of thousands of transactions on the platform and getting a sense, to Nitin's question, I think the real challenge is retaining zoom and focus at the same time, right? Like our human eye does it, right? We can zoom and retain focus. That's the unique design of our ability to see as humans. Now, in a platform, when you have thousands and thousands and millions of transactions happening, how do you retain zoom and focus so that you can focus on different problems at different layers of the system and not lose the fidelity? You get down to the individual's aspiration and then the collective and different levels of aggregation. And I think that is a plus and not a replacement of what you would otherwise do. So I would believe that the facilitation in the mentoring session would capture the aspirations right. But our ability to retain focus as we zoom in and zoom out, because of the way we analyze the data, the way we construct the synthesis, the way we abstract the learnings from it, probably give us more insights about the aspirations of people than an individual transaction would give. And I think that's the value. That is an additional value, not a replacement of a good mentoring interaction.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sanjay. With that, let's move into the next section. Briefly, what we're going to do is it's a continuation of the work that's happening in Orissa and OLM with Sanjay and the FES team. What we're going to share with you is 3 different perspectives. We'll show you what data we're able to generate and how that data is triggering different thought processes, how it is enabling people to express what they want to do next. And so we'll go through that. We'll start with the participants' perspective. I'm just going to pull up my screen. Forgive us, we're just going to toggle back and forth between me and Vijaya. I will share the context and then Vijaya will show you what actually is happening with data. So the first thing is participant perspective. What we realized is, traditionally speaking, the program was so keen on collecting data that most of the participants, but particularly in this case, the Krishi Mitra, would be essentially tasked with collecting that data. But very little of that data would actually get back to them, or we would do trainings with them, but not leave anything behind. So we looked at, and at the same time, the program was very hungry for data and wanted to understand what's happening, where, how, and so on and so forth. So we've gone on a journey over the last couple of years, and in the last 1.5 years in the ORISA and OLM program with FBS. So we're going to share some perspectives of what this data is doing and how we're managing to do that. Okay. So first of all, one part of the digital platform or technology that we introduced, we call it the participatory digital attestation platform. In simple terms, what it does is allows participants to essentially download an app. There was a lot of skepticism about participation if you want smartphones, etc. I think we are now getting past that with over 85 to 90% of them, over 90% of them participating in this effectively. But what happens is all we wanted them to do is essentially record their own participation as opposed to programs trying to figure out who attended each session. So we started with this simple task. And we also said, if we want them to do this, what do they need from it? So what we ended up doing was essentially, we realized that unless we give them back something, and in this case, it was data, it would not work, right? So they would not understand the need for them to continue to do this. And then consequently, the data that we get was bad. So this was the starting point. I'm going to request Vijaya to maybe just do a live demo. We promised that we will use less PPT this time. So Vijaya, could you? Yeah.
Just give me a second.
Sure. We're going to be rather brief, but wanted you to just have a sense of the real work that's happening on the ground. So this is the app. It's a very simple thing. We've tried to eliminate too much need for language, but the participant was required to essentially, I think these little messages keep popping up. Are you able to operate it? Okay, there you go. So the participant is just required to essentially click the center button and scan a QR code that the trainer would present at the beginning of the session. And then once the session is over, they would again click the button again. And what it would give them is what we call a digitally verifiable attestation. So if the trainers would get attestations and the participants would get attestations. Remember, some of these Krishi Mitras would quickly graduate to also training others. So eventually they might have both of them. So this is nothing but like a receipt. You know, when you participate in a session, they would get a simple digital recording of the fact that they participated. If you can click on that. So for example, if I were to participate in a session called Understanding Crop Water Budgeting, it basically clearly lays out that the entity that is conducting the training is Foundation for Ecological Security. This is the program, session name, description, and it gives details about start and end time. Also tells you who the trainers are, if you can just show that. And then, yeah. Okay, so there's some way for anybody else that sees this to verify it. And then it also gives them access to the content that was shared during that. So the challenge we found was that many Krishi Mitra, especially if we did high dose, low frequency training, meaning one training a year, 3-day intensive training and those kind of things, they were being left with very little to follow up. So if, let's say, middle of June, the training happened in January, in the middle of June, they wanted to explain to a farmer, they would often come back and say, look, I don't have any, I remember that training and I understood what happened there, but it's harder to explain. If you gave me a video or if you gave me a document that I could use to sort of show and tell and work with them. So now they have access to this content. So they can either open the content at will, and they can review it with somebody, or they can review it themselves before they go and approach a farmer. And they can also share this content. So what we also realized is the way that it works in these communities, that the Krishi Mitra is essentially a catalyst for discussion and dialogue. So we made it easy for them to share these content pieces with anybody else that they wish, right? So that they would essentially spread the word about good practices or so on and so forth, so they can share it over existing WhatsApp groups and so on and so forth. It's very simple. And if you can go back to the attestation, what this also did was, for the first time, gave the participant, in this case the Krishi Mitra, a record of the trainings that they've attended. And what we realized in the past is that if Krishi Mitras, if you approach Krishi Mitras who'd been in the field for 10 years and you ask them what trainings have you attended, they would often give you like a scant list of things that they remember, but there was no record of it. So invariably, every new program would start by training them again. So this gave them the ability to assert the work that they've already done or the training that they've done. Obviously, here we're just starting, so we're still recording just trainings, but there is a plan in the future to also record some of the tasks that they're completing or some of the plans that. So this is one element of it. Anything you want to add on this, Vijaya, from your experience?
I think the ability to use that content whenever they want to and share it with whoever they want to it, when the need is arising, I think that gives a lot of power to them to use that on the field.
Right, and we've had a number of people tell us that this is a really good tool. I can actually now, as you said, use the word power, but it gives them this confidence that they can contribute to that discussion more actively. Okay, so this is one element of it, and I think it was Nitin. So Nitin, the plan is, what we're realizing is, rather than us being able to see what their aspirations are, we said now that there is a record. Finally, there is a record of the work that they're doing on the ground, the trainings they're getting. What if we showed them the pathways forward? Meaning, imagine tomorrow the NSDC came up with a accreditation that said that if you have the following trainings from organizations like FES, you're welcome to come and attend an evaluation session. And if you pass that, we will give you a certificate. Right? Or tomorrow, the next program that comes by says, we want Krishi Mitra or some frontline workers who have done training in the following areas so that you can join and start working from day one, right? What if the next tranche of the program comes in and says, for people who haven't been trained, you have to go through 6-month training, but if you're able to demonstrate, show that you've already been trained, you can start working from day one. Typically, training is an unpaid activity. So they get incentives for performing tasks that result in outcomes. So these are some of the ways that we're sort of moving the ball forward with this idea. If I can take the screen back, thank you. So this is one aspect of it, and we'll have time for questions. The other perspective, given our short amount of time, is the program perspective. Obviously, while the Krishi Mitras were able to get access to the content, have a record of what they're doing, assert themselves a little more, both in the current context as well as potentially in the future, the program, and as Sanjay said, the number of interactions are going up. So the program needed a lot of data. What this allowed us to do, as long as we were able to convince Krishi Mitra to scan in and scan out here on the left-hand bottom corner, we could generate tons of data for the program. And also, while we were empowering participants, we were also able to use that data to address a number of those perspectives, as we were saying, that are required through the life of the project. So I'm going to hand it over to Vijaya to show you the live dashboard from Orissa and how that looks. And all of this data is being generated automatically through the interactions that Krishi Mitra are having on the ground.
Yeah. Thanks, Anand. So like Anand was saying, that all the Krishi Mitra needs to do is scan in and scan out, and there's a hordes of data which is getting generated on automatically. So if you look at the dashboard, I'm just going to take you through it very quickly, and if there are any questions, we can answer that. So if you look at the time range, you can select anything, right, from a week to a month to a year, depending on what exactly are you looking at. So here we've chosen the week. So let's look at the sessions aspect. So when you look at the sessions, what is visible is, since we looked at per week, we said, okay, how many sessions have been conducted per week? So it gives you visibility of the kind of activity that's happening based on what is required for the tasks that has to be, what kind of tasks are required to be performed, and hence what kind of sessions. If you look at here, we say that, okay, how many sessions are there per topic? And sometimes this is self-explanatory, as in it's like gives us an insight of what is exactly happening in this particular season, and it gives you an insight of what kind of topics and how many sessions have been conducted by the program. So that's an insight on the sessions. If I look at participation, so I have, of course, attestations of participants in terms of location, and then we look at the unique participants. On that particular week, how many unique participants have attended a particular session, and how many participants are there per topic. Now, what happens is this, it kind of gives us a visibility to where the participants are, who are these participants, how many numbers. Let's say, for example, the goal set out was, let's say, 800 Krishi Mitras. And it would give us an idea that, okay, for calendar Rabi crops, we have 673 Krishi Mitras who've been a part of this particular topic. So you know how many have been done, what are the gaps. On the flip side, you'll also know that, okay, a particular topic needs to be reworked or needs to be re-looked at it because the participation is lower. And then how do we address those gaps? So it kind of gives you both the views of what has been done, what are the gaps, and what needs to be done post that for the number of participants availability for any particular task that they want to go and perform. So that's in terms of the participation. And you can look at as per in terms of location where they are, and you can go as granular as you want to. Similarly, if I look at the trainer activity in the program, how many trainers are available for which topic, how many trainers are required for a particular topic as per the goals. So if I look at, right, I have these topics which are listed here, and I know how many trainers are available in the system. And you know that, okay, there's a uniform number here. So you said, okay, this is going good. Let's assume that a couple of months back, those numbers were not similar. And we said, okay, now what needs to be done to get trainers onboarded, and how do we get them to be a part of the system? So there is also visibility of the trainers in the program. When we look at the engagement aspect, here the visibility would be like what Anand was saying, that if you have 2 trainings in the year and they've done a training a particular time, sometimes the need of using the content would arise maybe 3 months down the line, or even after a week or 10 days. And how does one look at it? So here you could look at the kind of views a content would have, downloads, the content would, the kind of downloads that we could look at. And there you are. So you can see the content, which content is used more. And this is very obvious because the season has just got over and they were talking about storage of paddy seeds. And you can see that, okay, is this happening? Which content is being used more? Which content is not being used? Can I relook at it? Should the content be reworked at it? Should the program look at reworking a particular piece of content? So those kind of visibility and basically sensory capacity or capability arises in the program. And this can be done across at block level coordinators. I think in Odisha, they're looking at the district level coordinators where they have an access to this, and then decisions are made based on the kind of data that's getting generated. So then when we look at the advanced, here it's more specific. So here you could look at as per role. You could look at as per a particular topic and where these people are located. So for example, here we've looked at one topic. You could look at, now the new season is, the Kharif season is going to be happening. And then we said, okay, we need 8 topics on Kharif, but we've already trained some people in the last year. So you can look at those particular X number of topics and look at for Krishi Mitra or Krishak Sathis specifically in this particular, as field functionaries. And then look at who is visible, where is she is visible, what is the kind of, what is she getting, what has she learned, what kind of topics has she been exposed to, where are they from, which location. So I'll just take you through this, and you can see here participant attestations by role, badge, and base location. So let's say we're talking about total number of attestations as 517, out of which Odisha has 364. and I mean the Krishi Mitra, Krishak Sathis, and then you can look at a particular district and you say, okay, in that district, I have in these particular blocks, how many people, how many Krishi Mitra and Krishak Sathis are available who have done that particular topic. So you can choose 2 topics, you can choose 8 topics, you can choose 3 topics, you can even choose, let's say, Krishi Mitra and GRS because they work together and what is their visibility in the program. So you can look at participants where they're located. And this is only for Krishi Mitra, Krishak Sathis for that one particular topic. And you have unique users by role and by base location.
So I think, I know there are many questions and we'll get to that, but I think the important thing is at this moment, what we realized is given the pivotal role Krishi Mitra's play, we wanted to first essentially build that foundation layer, because what we found across programs is unless your capacity building foundation, particularly when you're dealing with issues of commons, etc., these individuals play a very critical role in facilitating that dialogue in the communities. And unless we can get a handle on those people and essentially give them continuity and also have continuity from a program perspective, we would end up expending a lot of energy both on their end as well as on the program end. What this allows is as you shift from season to season, you're able to reduce the amount of redundant effort and therefore release some of their bandwidth and time. And it has a lot of other implications also for these individuals directly, because often, particularly large programs, and not necessarily this one where they have a honorarium being paid, spend a lot of time training and retraining people and less time actually in the field communicating with farmers or so on and so forth. In order to reduce that, I think this data would give the visibility. Once you build that foundation of human capacity, then on top of that, we can look at outputs, outcomes, and so on and so forth. And that's the process or the journey that we're taking. So thank you, Vijaya. I'll now go to the next part. I know there are a few questions. We'll have ample time at the end of this to take questions. Just want to give you a sort of overall perspective. So then we also said, as Sanjay mentioned, how do we leave behind? So one is, of course, to think about what are the needs of the program itself, directly managing the effort on the ground. What are the needs of the frontline workers of Krishi Mitras or community cadre? But also what other visibility can others use? If you remember, we talked about these nutrients. How do other people discover what you're doing? How can you discover what other programs are doing? Obviously, FES is not the only organization operating in the field in Orissa. What if we could increase visibility amongst programs? So we started looking at this. And in reality, as I said, we started with how do we expose program footprint and essentially make that open and shareable? How do we essentially ensure that if anybody has trained someone, that those practitioners are visible, available, accessible, potentially employable by others? How do we essentially also take content and other open learning resources? And slowly now we're going into the land assessment and treatment maps, schemes and entitlements, demographic data, biodiversity data. So there is a plan to essentially go into the artifacts that get created on the ground, which have a long life. But as of now, we have sort of tackled these three, and we're just going to show you what that looks like. So over to you, Vijaya. Yeah, so this is, yes, go ahead, Vijaya.
No, go ahead, it's okay.
No, so this is just a, please feel free to add while I'm at it. So we have 4 or 5 programs that we've listed. This is something we just launched recently. The idea is that because we have chain of custody and we have clear consent from participants also have the ability to withdraw consent. So no PII of these participants are shared unless they have given explicit consent, which they can control on their mobile device. But then there's a lot of artifacts that are shareable and programs can give consent. For example, if we can just zoom into the Odisha area in the map. you'll see that FES is committed to essentially sharing this data openly. So as a demonstration, it gives you an idea. If I were a new program and I wanted to come in, if I had access to this website, I could clearly see, you can just go up and collapse the programs, Vijay. Actually, can you give me control? I'll just do it. Okay. So if you can see, if let's say I'm interested in Odisha, you can see here that let's say we had 50 programs, right? And only one of them is active in Odisha. I can clearly see that they have 964 people. It's called Building Government System Capacity for Behavior Change at Scale. And if you look at the learning content for that same thing, there are 104 learning content. I can go through that content. I can even, let's say it's related to watershed development, some farming, organic farming. I can even go look at that content. This is open and available for anybody. I can also, let's say I'm a government official and I'm interested in this particular aspect for my district or block. I can even contact one of these trainers potentially directly and say that, would you be in a position to come and help us with this and train my staff, right? So what this does is, I think somebody needs to go on mute. Sorry, there's some clanging noise. Thank you. So what this does is it gives us a fair amount of visibility. So we call this situational awareness. Basically, if we are going into a state, wouldn't it be nice if we could see who else is operating in that state, what they're operating on, so that it at least triggers some idea saying, okay, maybe we should talk to them before we go and duplicate efforts. Maybe we can leverage them. Maybe they have trained people already and those people are available either part-time or otherwise to help us complete this work. They may already be connected in those communities. They have community mobilization skills. They have relationships, rather than try and appoint new people or reinvent the wheel. This is the sort of awareness that we wanted to bring in. And eventually we will also bring in program artifacts like maps, resource maps, water budgets, water security plans, name it, right? Water quality reports, and so on and so forth. So this is just to give you an idea. We can, there are other programs, for example, in Meghalaya. So if I wanted to say Garo Hills, I can see how many people, let's say I'm a district commissioner, and I'm interested in seeing how many programs are operating in Garo Hills. Thanks to the scanned data, it's only one. But it allows me to quickly engage with programs. Typically, programs approach communities. Now, I think we want to turn the tide and say, what if communities can engage with programs and reach out and say, hey, we are very interested in solving the problem that you're trying to address. Would you be in a position to help us? So we're trying to generate demand for programs as a result of opening up this data and potentially giving access to community members, government officials, and other peer partners across the ecosystem. Just going to stop here for a second. And Sanjay Joshi, if you had any sort of closing thoughts or things to add about this, and then we can go into Q&A.
Yeah, just a few more thoughts. It's just for FES, it's just a beginning, but we are seeing a promising one. We are still grappling with the whole idea of dealing with this situation. But we are very motivated with the foundation of enhanced capacities of the system to see the problem. So that's the most important part, that the system is able to see the problem and are coming up with solutions which are locally fit. It's not solutions which are coming from outside. It's solutions which are coming from the grassroots. So what important is the data, the information, the training module, the map, and the plans which Anand was referring to, which are available across 5 districts in Orissa. How can that be scaled across the different geographies with different partners? And how can the government also adopt it as a way of working so that all these things become open and freely available resource for everybody to use? And we are not inventing the wheels every time we kind of approach another problem. So there are some aspects of the problem that are already, you can say, decoded in different ways. And we just need to pull those important elements and build a new answer to a different part of a problem. I think that is it from my side. Thank you.
Reminded of a story I just wanted to add. So when the business case for the GPS, the Global Positioning System, was being presented to the Air Force, the question was asked of the presenters saying, so what does the GPS do? And the presenter said, it tells you where you are. And the reply was, how stupid is that? I know where I am. And I think sometimes answering this fundamental question at scale across thousands and millions of transactions has the transformative capability that GPS has had on our society at large. Because once you could reliably and scalably say you are here, on that you could build the layer of saying, so where do you want to go? And then you could conceive a map, a journey, alternative routes. You could calculate the time it takes to cross that route. Then somebody could say, well, if you know the time and if you know the route, I can put a car on that route. And today you're happily clicking away at Uber and saying, oh my goodness, who thought of this? This is so brilliant. The real genius was in figuring out the GPS. And I think that is the endeavor. Of course, we have a long way to go. It's a journey. And the endeavor is in managing the commons. What is that GPS? And the day we get a good handle of that at scale, I'm sure the ecosystem will come together for a lot of other innovations that will stack up around this fundamental question that there is capacity here. Where is the capacity? It is here. You know, at scale, if we can answer that question, it would change the way we look at commons.
Thank you, Sanjay.